And we're also building very sophisticated smart contract applications. So we have one, uh, every Microsoft Xbox video game, all those purchases are processed using a smart contract developed for EY and deployed for Microsoft.
This episode is brought to you by Gemini, which is one of the top crypto exchanges in the industry. I've been a user of Gemini for many years. They make it easy for you to buy, sell, and trade crypto. Gemini has a lot of unique features. They have a fully functional app, a credit card. They include staking on their platform, and they also have a stablecoin called Gemini Dollar, which is USD backed. And Gemini is certified, regulated, and licensed. They are available in 70 plus countries. And if you sign up using my code or link, which will be in the description, you can get $15 in Bitcoin when you trade your first $100. So if you'd like to learn more about Gemini, visit the link in the description. Welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and with me today is Paul Brody, who is the global blockchain leader at EY, also the chairman of the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, and also an author. Paul, great to have you on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Paul, I'm super excited to speak with you. I've followed EY for years. Of course, I've seen the brand in different places. On the Garden State Parkway that I drive down here in New Jersey, I see the EY logo on a building. And the fact that you folks are building with blockchain and doing all types of great things has me really excited. So I want to learn all the details. But before we get there, tell us about yourself and your background.
So, geez, that's such a wonderful open-ended question. I really I got into the blockchain business by accident, kind of in an entirely unintentional way. I've always kind of been in the technology business, and before I came to EY, I spent about 14 years at IBM. And while I was at IBM, I got very excited about sort of cloud computing and especially distributed computing, where these devices that we own are getting very, very smart. And one of the really strange things about these super smart devices we own is that somehow we still need all this cloud infrastructure to manage them. And I got into this idea of, hey, if the devices are really smart, we should be able to make software where the devices manage themselves. And so we started looking, I had a little research team, we started looking at a decentralized and distributed computing. And somebody came to me and they said, hey, Bitcoin is like a decentralized computing thing. And I got very excited. I was like, wow, this is really amazing. It's decentralized computing, it's permissionless, and it's even got kind of a form of money in it. And we were going down this Bitcoin path, which was already very exciting, when somebody came to me and said, I found something that's really cool. It's like Bitcoin, but programmable. And I've met this guy. His name is Vitalik. You got to meet him. And that like directed us again. And honestly, once I went down this road, I mean, first of all, we built IBM's very first blockchain product, which was for kind of smart devices. We launched it with Samsung as a prototype. But also for me, it really kind of changed my life. I was like, this is it. This is the future. I want to go do this.
Mm. And when did you meet Vitalik? Was that before Ethereum became a thing, or was it in the early days after it launched?
We were actually working on the alpha version of Ethereum when I was at IBM. So this was like 2013. My engineering team was working on this, and we really got sort of ramping up in 2014, and we showed our prototype with Samsung at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas in January 2015. And I have this great picture. It's so funny. It's like the IBM crew on one side, and it's the Samsung crew on the other, and in the middle are like me and Vitalik.
Wow.
And it just like I keep that picture because it's such a fun reminder. Like we had no idea what we were doing. We didn't know it was going to become a huge thing. But I think for a lot of the people in that picture, certainly for me, it really changed the course of my career.
Oh, absolutely. That's amazing. And I'm sure you have that picture frame somewhere in your office or something like that.
I don't have a frame in my office, but I know where it is in my like iPhoto archive. And it's funny actually because I've stayed in touch with Vitalik. He wrote like a nice little foreword for my book,
Mm.
and I sent him a copy. And it was actually really cool. A couple of weeks ago, he DM'd me, and he's like, I've just been reading your book, and I want to talk about like, some of these like protocols that you kind of envision. And I was like, wow, it's very exciting. It is so awesome when people come up to you like, hey, I was reading your book and I thought about this, or I read your book and it caused me to change like how I'm thinking about the business or my career path. Stuff like that. It's really awesome. It's also honestly, it's a little bit scary because you feel like this responsibility. Like, when did I become a role model for people?
For sure. So tell us a bit more about your book. It is the topic is of course around Ethereum.
Yeah, so the book is called Ethereum for Business. And what for a long time, I spent so much of my time, especially at EY, just kind of explaining to people, like, first of all, what is crypto? What is blockchain? Like, how does it work? But also, the inevitable next question from people is, what's the point? Why? What are you doing with this stuff? Like, why does any of this matter? Why is Bitcoin important? Why is Ethereum important? And so I wrote the book to kind of answer those questions in plain English with no technical jargon. And so there's three parts to the book. The first part is in very plain English, what are blockchains, right? How does Ethereum work? Why is it actually really important to have a public blockchain? Why is it that permissioned private blockchains are really not a super constructive, helpful thing to have around? And why, in particular, is privacy technology an important part of the overall blockchain picture? So that's the first part. The second part, the main chunk of the book, is like 20 chapters on specific use cases,
Mm.
payments, supply chain management, procurement, carbon emissions tracking, things that businesses can do that are practical and useful on Ethereum with this technology. And then in the last part, there's a little bit of a section which is just on things like, what's an audit? This is a business, by the way. People are running around this business saying, oh, we did the audit. We've been security audited. We've been audited. Like, no, all these people who are saying that they're audits, like they're most of the things that people talk about as audits are not really audits. They're reviews or they're assessments, but they're not audits,
Mm.
right? And I speak as somebody, I'm not an accountant, but I do work in an audit firm. I do actually, in almost 10 years, I have finally figured out what an audit is. And whatever it is, it's not all this security stuff that people claim to be doing, right? And so I kind of explain like what is an audit, right? What is a real audit? Like what is not an audit? How do you actually kind of check security properly? And also just other things that people ask a lot about in the business world, like, what's the carbon footprint of Ethereum? Is this like a huge problem? Like, isn't it crazy to use a blockchain to track emissions if the carbon footprint is really high? And so kind of just dispel a lot of the myths and misunderstandings that people have around this technology.
I love it. And one of the challenges I've seen over the years is the education and awareness is not there of the use cases. And sometimes people, they follow headlines. They listen to some skeptic who said, "Oh, this is a fax machine," or "There's no use for it," right? But there are uses, there are real use cases, and it will solve a lot of problems. So I love that your book explains that.
Yeah, people are saying like, "Oh, NFTs, it's just a little bit of art." No, NFTs are essential for industrial infrastructure. Every car, every piece of factory machinery, every satellite we put in orbit, that's an NFT. It's a non-fungible, unique item.
Mm, absolutely. And you are also the chairman of the the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. Tell us about what you're doing there and the initiatives and so forth.
So the real purpose of the EEA is to, as a group, represent the Ethereum business users, right? To get us together. And we're a very sort of fun but boring industry association, right? We do meetups, we do
Mm.
conferences. We're sponsoring like a business day called Industry Day at DevCon next month in Thailand. So we have meetups. We work on standards. We just published like DeFi risk standards. We published cross-chain interoperability standards. So and we we basically work on education as well. we're here both to talk to the Ethereum Foundation about what business users want, and we're also here to talk to the business world about how you make use of Ethereum and really educate people about the practical applications of this technology.
Mm. So let's talk EY. For those who may not know about the firm, I know what it is, but sometimes people haven't heard about the brand, or they may have heard of Ernst and Young and not realize it's EY. Tell us about the company, a quick overview, and also some of the blockchain initiatives you're working on.
Absolutely. So EY is one of the sort of what the people call the big four global professional services firms. They're all grounded in financial statement auditing, but they all also offer consulting, usually tax advice, in some countries, legal services as well, right? So they're just really big professional services firms. Firms like EY, we serve pretty much every big company on earth. You can think of a big company, either we are their auditor, or we provide tax advice, or we provide consulting advice. Like we are, or we do kind of system integration work. So firms like EY have this direct path into the world's largest businesses. And we do a lot of kind of essential services for them. And, from my point of view, we are therefore also an incredible mechanism to deliver transformation around blockchain technology, right? If you ask like any CFO, any chief financial officer, hey, do you guys take payment in Bitcoin? Like, would you use stable coins? The first thing they're going to say is, let me check with my auditor. Let me check with my finance team. Let me check with my technology team. Is it safe to do it? Is it legal? Can we do it? Do we have to pay taxes on it? And so I see, particularly for the blockchain team at EY, I see this path for us where our mission is to make the world's business users feel comfortable, ready, and able to go use this technology. And that takes a bunch of different forms. By far, the biggest thing we do is just financial statement audits. We audit like a ton of these cryptocurrency exchanges. We've built a lot of technology for audits. Some things that are very simple but super important. Like, let's say you give an exchange $1,000 to buy some Bitcoin for you.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that our technology does, and one of the things that auditors do, is they say, okay, they got $1,000 in. We match their financial transactions, their internal record of a transaction, with what's on chain. Like, if we add up all the money that was given to this exchange, do they have that much Bitcoin on chain? Like, can we verify that? That is kind of a foundational thing that auditors do. And they do other things like check for, are you properly separating duties? Like, do you make sure that nobody's pledging Bitcoin that you owe your depositors to, say, somebody else? So financial statement audits, hugely important, and I think critical to giving people confidence that companies that they can buy and safely use crypto with other businesses.
I love that.
Secondly, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the key word you use there is critical, because in a post FTX world, we see how important that is, and no commingling. These exchanges have the funds they say they have, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I've been really happy to see is, like, for example, with the markets and crypto assets regulation in the European Union, they've laid out a really good regulatory framework, and it has a clear role for what auditors are supposed to do, what kind of business controls companies are supposed to put in. And, this is really, really great, because without it, people don't often know even what to ask for, but with it, the rules are very clear. If you're going to play in this market, you need to have these certain controls, just like those in place. Hugely important, right? And I also think, by the way, like, it's a much better marketplace when people are all operating legitimately. I can tell you, it's super frustrating for legitimate businesses to compete with frauds, because frauds can make promises legitimate businesses can't match. Right.
Absolutely. You were mentioning there was a second item related to what you were doing as far as initiatives.
Yeah. So if I think about sort of the stuff that we do, one is financial statement audits, right? And then in addition to financial statement audits, we also build applications and do business services. So we have consulting services, we do implementations, we build things kind of for hire for clients. But additionally, we are really, and we're quite unique in this compared to pretty much any other big professional services firms. We are building applications on top of Ethereum.
Mm.
And our applications are for business users. And we built quite a few of them. So the one of the ones that we built is a smart contract security testing system. You can actually go in, you can test your smart contracts, you can simulate smart contracts, and you can
Wow.
also hire us to do a full security review of your smart contracts. Secondly, we are building more sort of direct operational business applications. So we have one that is for minting NFTs. We have ones for supply chain traceability. We're tracking, I think, something on the order of like 6 or 7 million bottles of wine, millions of bottles of beer, like many, tens of thousands of vaccines. Like that's a very typical application. And we're also building very sophisticated smart contract applications. So we have one, every Microsoft Xbox video game, all those purchases are processed using a smart contract developed for EY and deployed for Microsoft.
Wow.
We've also just started a really cool program that we're rolling out, which is it enables companies to manage their renewable energy purchasing, their green electric purchasing on a blockchain using a smart contract built with privacy technology so your competitors cannot see what you're doing.
Mm. So that was going to be my next question. Are these blockchains that are being built on top of ETH, are they private? I'm assuming they're permissioned, so it's just within the enterprise?
They're generally not permissioned. Now, in the case of Microsoft, so very early on, and we are again, so we're super unusual in the sense that EY is really the only big firm that made a commitment pretty much from day one that our priority are public blockchains.
Mm.
Now, that doesn't mean that we never do kind of permission systems. We do from time to time, but for the most part, we really try to build on public chains, and specifically, we're a very Ethereum centric. We're a build on Ethereum organization, and that's just for me. It's very strategic. Like
Mm.
I would rather be the best in the world at Ethereum than okay at like five different things. Like it's just about focus, right? I have a limited engineering budget. I want to be great at Ethereum. The thing that is important, and the reason why people are always embracing permission chains is enterprises need privacy,
Mm.
right? No company wants to show their competition what they're buying, where it's going, how much they're paying.
Mm.
And so the last thing that we do, and one of the things I'm especially proud of, is we do privacy technology research. So lots of companies, for a decade, lots of companies, people have looked at Ethereum and said, scalability is a problem. I looked at Ethereum and I said, privacy is the gap. And very few people are working on privacy. And so we made it our priority. And we have built and industrialized the tools that make it possible for companies to transact with privacy on top of public Ethereum. And we donated those tools into the public domain so anybody can use them.
Now, there have been people that said, why, and this is not me, but just questions in general. Why would someone build on ETH given that maybe it's slower from a transaction standpoint because there are layer twos that help to scale it and improve transaction speed, but also transaction costs. So tell us a bit about that. Is it the security? These companies want security and they want something that is trusted and that works.
So layer twos, in my point of view, are Ethereum. They're EVM compatible. They build on top of Ethereum. So when I say that we build on Ethereum, the truth is actually for most of the things that we do, we actually deploy on top of an L2 or a sidechain like Polygon or Base or some of these others, right? And in fact, our privacy tool that we built called Nightfall that we put into the public domain, it's deployed on the Polygon proof of stake network. But it can also be deployed on like Base. It can be deployed on Ethereum as an L2, on Base as an L3, for example. So, you know, uh, Ethereum plus the L2s are the Ethereum ecosystem.
Okay.
Now, the point you make, though, is a good one. People are like, well, why not all these other chains? Because, one of the things that you can get sucked into really easily is this whole discussion of like, hey, uh, XYZ chain has a faster finality or whatever. Um, I regard that as a kind of those kinds of debates as a little bit of a dead end. Historically, in the technology world, the best technology does not win. Technology improves all the time, but it's rarely the best one that wins, right? Nobody is going around saying that the desktop or mobile operating systems we have are the best ones that are possible. And they're just the ones that happen to be good enough at a certain point in time to get mass adoption. That was Ethereum, that was ETH. And I'm going to get sucked into this debate about which one is better. I'm just going to say the vast majority of the world's developers, money, and users is in the Ethereum ecosystem. Therefore, we are going to build in Ethereum because we are going to build where our customers are already.
Mm. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I know Ethereum has had a first mover advantage, but I think one of the things I've heard and seen is the security aspect. It's trusted. There are a lot of folks building on it. So that's a great point that you brought up. Now, you mentioned the wine industry. You mentioned pharmaceutical, if I'm not mistaken. What other industries are you seeing leveraging your services? Auto, are there other call outs?
So fundamentally, every business agreement on earth boils down to something very simple. I've got money, you got stuff, and we're changing my money for your stuff under the term of the agreement, under terms of an agreement. That describes every single industry on earth. Now, in financial services, it's just a swap, right? I want to buy some stock or a bond or a Bitcoin token. It's just money for the market price. But in most other business environments, there's actually a complicated agreement. If you think about a big car company and the relationship they have with a supplier, it's usually like some of these relationships last for decades. They have special terms and conditions, they have special rules. My goal is to basically build the tools that allow any company to transact with any other company because we can represent the money as digital tokens, right? Stable coins or crypto. We can represent the stuff as digital tokens. That can be real world assets. They can be physical assets, cars, paintings, crypto assets. Doesn't matter what it is. The money and the stuff are tokens, and the agreement that covers their exchange is a smart contract. So what we've been limited to in the recent past is things that people are willing to do without privacy, because privacy like hugely increased your transaction costs. We're now entering into this era where we have industrialized privacy infrastructure that we can run on a public chain efficiently. And so we're going to start to get into what I hope we're going to shift from marketing stuff like, hey, look, I have 6 million bottles of wine on the blockchain and you can see where they went, to operational stuff, which is I've got 3 million auto parts moving through my factory kind of structures. They're going out to distributors and dealers. We just finished a prototype for a big electronics company, which I'm very excited about. It's a full supply chain model where everything is tokenized, running under privacy on a public blockchain.
Wow.
And that's, for me, is kind of where I want to be.
That's amazing and exciting. So, what I'm curious about, Paul, is are these companies in the R&D trial and error phase, or are they in the full production and they just have to scale it? Or I know it may be different for each individual, but let's say on average, are they, in the production phase and they just have to scale it?
No, so it really depends on the industry. Financial services, doesn't care as much about privacy because fungible tokens provide a much easier level of privacy. Financial services are way far down the road. They're production, they're scaling up, they're ramping up their real world asset process. What they're now trying to do is they've got real world assets, they've got crypto assets, they've got regulatory infrastructure. They're now cutting deals with banks to figure out how to distribute these to millions of users. The financial services market all over the world is in this massive scale out process. Manufacturing, supply chain, stuff that depends on privacy, it's in the pilot and proof of concept stage, right? As well as public chain smart contracts that run as zero knowledge circuits, again, kind of in that proof of concept stage or the pilot stage or early production customers. So it's ramping along, but anything that requires privacy is probably 5 or 6 years behind the mainstream like financial services stuff, which doesn't require privacy.
Interesting. And that makes sense. Now, speaking of the payments and finance aspect, PayPal, EY, and I think via Coinbase settled the first corporate invoice payment, I believe, with PYUSD stablecoin. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so we have been accepting at EY, we've been accepting payment in stablecoins and crypto for quite a few years, but
Mm.
we've been doing it manually, right? So our client calls us and is like, "Hey, I'm going to send the money," and we call up like our Coinbase institutional people and we're like, "Hey, did you get the money?" Right? And it's a very manual process. It's cool, you get some bragging rights from that, but it's not scalable and it doesn't generate return on investment. The big milestone that we achieved a couple of weeks ago was that we turned what was a kind of individualized, customized, manual process into a scalable, automated process by plugging it into SAP.
Mm.
So the big milestone wasn't just that we got a payment, it was that this payment was executed from inside of an enterprise ERP. Now, I don't know how many of your viewers know what ERP is, right? And to anybody who doesn't know what ERP is, I say, I am so envious because ERP is like the monster of all enterprise systems, but it is ERP systems, what are known as enterprise resource planning systems, they're this infrastructure that companies use to run everything, and they use it to automate everything. And so, if you go into a store and you buy the last hoodie on the shelf and you check out with that hoodie, the company's ERP system says, "Oh, I'm down to 0 hoodies in the store. I'm going to place an order for replenishment." All of this stuff gets automated. And when you automate stuff, you make savings. Now, we all know that, say, paying somebody using PayPal USD or USDC crypto rails is way cheaper than paying somebody with a traditional wire transfer. What was missing in the corporate world was the technology to automate that. And the big milestone we had wasn't just getting paid with PYUSD on an invoice, it was that the SAP instance of PayPal automated this payment. And what that means, and SAP has hardened this into their system. So now you can use the wallet inside of SAP, or you can use an institutional wallet as a company and start taking your literally millions of payments and orders that you make every year and moving them from more expensive networks to much cheaper crypto, blockchain, stablecoin infrastructure.
Wow. That's amazing, Paul. We've come such a far way, and to hear it, what's happening from behind the scenes, it's amazing. Um, and as far as where you're at in the phase of rolling this out to other clients and so forth, is it trial and error right now, and then further iteration is needed and so forth?
Actually, the really cool thing about the SAP case is that they have hardened this, industrialized, it's now in the product,
Mm.
right? Now, SAP is not a consumer product, right? It's not like, hey, open up your smartphone and flip a couple switches, but it is the kind of thing where a CFO can tell somebody on their team, like, hey, I want to go implement this. And, within a few weeks, they might call EY. Hopefully they call EY. We'll come in. We're like, listen, here's your security process. Here's how you make sure you don't accidentally pay somebody. Here's how to configure the SAP tool, right? That's the kind of thing that we love doing and are actually quite good at. And, in doing this with PayPal and SAP, we worked together with them to figure out, okay, because it's not just like, hey, cut a check. But when large companies transact with each other, they're like, okay, what's our security policy? How do we make sure we don't actually don't accidentally pay somebody the wrong amount of money or send it to an irretrievable address? So those are the kinds of things that go on. And we laid out all of that process and all the configuration rules so that other companies can repeat this relatively quickly.
Mm. Now, PYUSD was used. Are you going to enable it to use your system to use USDC and other stablecoins?
Yeah, we can use basically any kind of stable coin. You can use a cryptocurrency. And what's really cool also is SAP has enabled a wallet. And with a wallet inside of the ERP system, again, come back to this, like, I have money, you have stuff. Well, this deal with SAP was all about the money, moving the money back and forth kind of on crypto rails. But once you have a wallet, there's nothing stopping you from automatically minting stuff tokens. Like if you have a factory and every time you produce a cup, you can create a token and put that in that wallet. And when you sell it to somebody else, you can transfer that token. So now we're into the business of managing inventory, tracking inventory, moving it all around, and doing it in a fully automated way. And eventually, what we want to get to this model where basically all of your contracts, your business transactions, your assets, your inventory, it can all be managed on a public blockchain.
Wow, that's incredible. How does what you guys do, and obviously you're the experts, align with the IRS? And I know there's still some clarity that's needed on the IRS front with taxes and crypto and so forth. Are there any hurdles there, or are you in contact with the folks at the IRS to figure all this out?
So we have some really awesome tax people, and I'm not an awesome tax person. I'm not even a bad tax person. I have to ask somebody else for advice. So to some degree, you asked the wrong person. What I would say is when it comes to like staking and some of the like more cutting edge stuff, there is, our tax people do work with the IRS. We try to figure out what the rules are and comply. And that is, a lot of the some of the newer stuff that crypto does is kind of working its way through that process. But when it comes to more traditional B2B procurement applications, in those cases, you don't actually need new tax rules. You don't need anything else. Like all we're doing on chain is replicating a process that already exists in the real world. And the same tax rules that apply if I pay you with a wire transfer also apply if I pay you with like USDC. So, that kind of keeps it relatively simpler because systems like SAP and large companies have already built all of their tax rules in.
Okay, that makes sense. There's no, like you said, nothing new here because stable coins, you're just in and out, and there should be no capital gains or whatever it is, obviously, unless they use
I don't think so, right? I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that for the absolute certainty because you'd have to talk to a tax person. But generally speaking, large companies are not going to embrace this if it's going to make their tax liabilities more complicated.
Hmm. Now, are you working with any companies that are starting to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet? Because that seems to be a growing trend. And there was the FASB update to rules and accounting. Are you seeing a growing adoption on that front as well?
So we serve a ton of like hedge funds and investment funds that absolutely hold all kinds of crypto assets on their balance sheet. That's pretty normal. Um, we also serve a lot of banks that act as custodians or serve as kind of third party holders for other people's assets, and that again is pretty normal. What we're really not seeing is any kind of traditional business. I think everybody thinks about, MicroStrategy is kind of this example of a company that's they've bought a ton of Bitcoin. That's actually a very atypical strategy. For the most part, large companies think about Bitcoin or XRP or ETH the same way they think about any kind of foreign currency, which is they really want to minimize their risk. They are, if you ask a car maker, hey, what do you do? They say, we make cars,
Mm.
right? We don't speculate in currency. Like their main goal isn't to make a profit on a cryptocurrency like holding position. Their main goal in almost all cases is actually to minimize risk. And this is actually one of the main reasons why in the large enterprise space, what people mostly want to do is they want to transact in stable coins in national currencies. Because if you're an American company, your revenues are in dollars, your employee salaries are in dollars, your taxes are in dollars, your shareholder dividends are in dollars. So you just want to stay in dollars because then you have no foreign exchange risk. And it's the same if you're a British company or a EU-based company or a Japanese company. That's why we're going to see such immense adoption by stablecoins in the enterprise sector because they minimize risk for business users.
Mm. And to your point of stablecoin adoption, I mean, we're just seeing the stablecoin wars heating up. There's rumors of new companies coming in with stablecoins. Do you think some of these enterprises may create their own stablecoin, which they use internally? Like I think of JP Morgan's JPM coin. It's very intrabank, if that's the word, and it's not outside to the public. What do you think about that?
I think that's very likely. So companies do a ton of transactions with themselves internally, right? Like if I do a project, I have clients in the Middle East. When I do a project in the Middle East, what actually happens is a client in the Middle East goes to like EY in Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates. They sign a local contract there. And then EY in that country say, oh, we want some of Paul's time. They actually sign what's called an intercompany agreement with EY in the United States. So, and that is common. That happens millions of times a year in big companies. And we estimated that we spend, many, many millions of dollars billing ourselves, paying ourselves, sending that money around. And so I very much expect to see internal stablecoin transactions, internal sort of company coin transactions. And I also think some very large enterprises, well, I know some very large enterprises are actively thinking about launching layer two networks, stable coins, right? They see these as strategic assets in a rapidly growing marketplace and ecosystem.
Wow. Um, and how are you and those enterprises navigating the uncertainty in the market? I know using stablecoins, there's not necessarily any red flags for the SEC unless you're offering yield and so forth. But there is this uncertainty because the SEC seems to be going after everything. We don't know what the rules of the road are. Congress is trying to get some bills together, get it through the Senate. Are there any challenges there?
There are challenges, but actually they're less than many people realize. Like one of the things that's sort of interesting is you'll hear people say, "Oh, it's not allowed," or "I heard you can't do this." But that's not actually really true. The truth is that if you are thoughtful and work to follow the law, you can absolutely do. Look at PayPal, right? No one's coming after PayPal. No one's going after Fidelity. No one's going after BlackRock or Goldman Sachs or Circle, right? The companies that invest a lot of money in regulatory compliance, make very good efforts to follow the rules, have generally not had bad outcomes. Doesn't mean it's perfect, but they've generally not had bad outcomes. Now, I would not say the regulatory environment in the US is as clear cut and as straightforward as, say, MiCA. MiCA in Europe is really excellent because it lays out in a very prescriptive manner if you want to offer any kind of crypto asset or what they call an asset-backed token, like a stable coin or a gold coin or something like that. It explicitly and very clearly lays out the rules in a way that's relatively straightforward to follow. So I think right now, the European Union, particularly in terms of large financial markets, sets the benchmark in terms of like, I can clearly follow the rules. But anybody who comes to me and says, "Oh, I can't do this in the USA," I'm like, no, that is absolutely not true. There are a ton of examples. You absolutely can do it in the USA. You just need to be maybe a bit more careful, right? And maybe a bit more risk averse. But I would not, there's not as much uncertainty as people think there is, right? It's just in some cases a bit more complexity.
Oh yeah, for sure. Now, you're one of the top four accounting firms in the world. Are you paying attention to what your competitors are doing? How are you trying to, or what's your strategy to stay ahead of the curve, against the others?
I mean, for
There's a
sure,
lot.
like somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, XYZ is doing X," I would never say, "Don't tell me what they're doing." But for the most part, like, you know, and we're really unique in this. You go back 9, 10 years ago, look at some of our documents, presentations. Honestly, I'm a broken record. I'm super boring. I've been saying the same thing for a decade. Public blockchains, stable coins, privacy technology, regulatory compliance. But literally the four things I've been saying for a decade. And the at the end of the day, it's very interesting. I would say most of our peers have kind of they've exited any effort to really build a strategic place here or build their own applications. So but our business is doing really well. We had a rough year during the crypto winter. Last year, we almost returned to the same level we were at before the crypto winter, just below that. Like business is good. I'm expecting us to surpass that this year and have our best ever kind of blockchain and crypto year. I think uh, consistency and listening to the clients and what they want is much more valuable than kind of worrying about your competition.
Mm,
I will say, however, that listening to the clients does not mean always giving them what they want.
sure.
And this is where I am stubborn and difficult to deal with. And people say mean things about me sometimes inside of the firm because, many times the truth is clients don't really know what they want. They think they want a private blockchain, but they don't. And, a lot of times we basically walked away from deals because the client's like, I want you to do this on XYZ chain that's not Ethereum, or I want to do it on a permission chain. And we'd be like, honestly, it's not going to work. It's
Mm,
not going to have a happy ending. And it's super frustrating when you see a competitor pick up that revenue and make a lot of money. And it's also kind of satisfying when you see the project kind of belly flop or when the client comes back and says, I think you were right. I I first and foremost, I believe it's important to kind of stick to what you know is right. And sometimes that does mean walking away from the business if somebody wants to do something that's just not going to work.
mm. Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. Now, have you seen a growing demand from different enterprises and industries since the likes of BlackRock have entered the space with ETFs, tokenization, where they kind of raise the credibility of the industry, uh, and not to mention Fidelity, Franklin Templeton, and so forth. Have you seen a surge in demand?
I mean, it's kind of amazing. One of the things that is, the crypto winter was we work on like a July to July fiscal year, but the crypto winter was kind of going full swing. It was pretty difficult, and two things happened that were really important. First of all, the MiCA legislation came into effect inside the European Union, and secondly, the ETFs were approved. And honestly, just business went like this. It was okay before, but it just took off like a rocket, and we went from like not being busy enough to actually being very busy, like basically sold out on the consulting side, like
Wow.
significant backlog of projects. It's business has improved a lot. And what's interesting is even though if you're an industrial company and you want to do like supply chain traceability, you don't need any SEC approval. You're not doing anything financial,
Right.
but the ETF offerings, the seal of approval that kind of comes from like BlackRock and others getting into the specifically endorsing public Ethereum as their path forward, that had an impact on industrial customers who were like, okay, I guess it's going to be all right. And it was very positive.
Mm. Oh, I can imagine. I mean, just on the retail side, which I have a view of, definitely changed things, and I can't imagine on the enterprise side. Um, this is related to something I asked you earlier about timeline. Paul, do you see us in 5 years? The majority of enterprises will be using blockchain and that's a supply chain management. All these things will be running on blockchain. I can go on Amazon, click on a dialog box and see where this product came from, what it's made of, and it's verified on the blockchain.
In 5 years for some companies, basically the way to think about this is that large enterprises and also major investment changes take decades to kind of unfold. So if you look at e-commerce has been growing at about 20 to 25% a year for the last 20 years, right? And still the majority of our commerce is actually done in stores. So that mainstream adoption does not mean like everybody's doing it overnight. What it means is that when you enter a mainstream adoption period in almost any kind of product, what you end up with is like if it's a consumer product, it takes about 10 years. If it's a business to business thing, it tends to take 20 or more years. Some things can take up to 30 years. Like a good example is in the 1950s, if you had a retirement plan and if you lived in the US and you had a retirement plan, 97% of your assets were in bonds. 97%. By the 1980s, less than 50% were in bonds and more than 50% were in stocks.
Mm.
It took 30 years for people's investment behavior to change. So I would say conservatively, 30 years from now, almost every company will be using blockchain for something, probably for large chunks of their business. And almost every person will have some form of digital asset, crypto, a blockchain-based investment vehicle as part of their savings and retirement plan, right? And one of my frustrations is people think too short about the timeline here. The timeline for real transformation, for really changing how the world works, isn't 5 years or even 10 years. It's 20 to 30.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And they'll be the first movers, and then eventually the rest will follow. But that definitely takes time.
Right. And I think the big danger, so a lot of people will hear 20 or 30 years and say, oh, it's early days yet. No, no, no. Go look at e-commerce, go look at the web. The leaders were found within a decade of the start of the business. And go look at e-commerce, go look at like cloud computing. The leaders in that business, not only did they have their lead within the first decade, they held on to it. They're almost impossible to dislodge, right? And so if you're a business leader thinking to yourself, I have time, you don't. You do not have time. You need to be in this game and winning it now. Otherwise, you're going to be playing catch up for 20 years.
Mm. Um, Paul, I know we're running up on time, so I want to get a couple questions here before I let you go. What's on your roadmap for the remainder of 2024, maybe early 2025?
So big roadmap, kind of key things for 2024 and 2025. We have a major release of our supply chain security infrastructure that we are going to deploy. So I can't tell you what it is, but it's going to be awesome. I'm actually pretty excited about it. It's cool. And we're also, we announced Nightfall 3. Or we announced Nightfall earlier this year, which is our fourth generation privacy technology. We showed the prototype in April. We're in now what I would call a private alpha in production, kind of testing it out. We'll go into like a private beta with a couple partners in January, February, and I hope we will have a public beta announcement to make by March or April of next year.
Well, I will have to have you on to talk about that. That sounds really exciting. I have some wrap-up questions here for you. First, if you could create your own metaverse, what would the theme be?
Wow, that is a good question. I personally am a bit of a science fiction nut. I love the stories of Alistair Reynolds. I kind of grew up on a lot of the like Isaac Asimov stuff. Um, I think, uh, you know, Alistair, kind of an Alistair Reynolds kind of revelation space universe would be a fun place to live.
Hmm. Rapid fire questions. Favorite food?
Uh, I don't have one anymore because I've learned to like so many different foods, but I would say like my comfort food is often like it's some kind of breakfast food, like pancakes. Yeah, chocolate chip pancakes.
Favorite musician or band?
Uh, Depeche Mode. I'm an 80s boy.
Nice. Favorite movie?
Brazil
Hmm.
with Terry Gilliam.
I don't think I've heard of that, but I'll have to check that one out. Favorite book?
I think um Foundation by Isaac Asimov. It doesn't reread well. Like people say, oh, science fiction doesn't age well, but and that's really true. But it had a huge impact on me as a kid, sort of thinking about, we're not just on planet Earth. We're part of this like enormous galaxy, and there's so much out there that we should, I hope, be able to explore.
Hmm. And I think I know the answer to this, but what do you do for fun outside of working at EY?
Uh, Well,
Ryan?
I've got a husband, two kids, and a dog. But I do triathlons. I do about one Ironman a year. So I kind of like a little bit of the sports stuff.
Awesome. Paul, absolute pleasure chatting with you. I'm excited for the future updates around EY, and I'll love to have you back on as those things roll out. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Tony. Have a terrific day. Thanks for having me.